You're welcome. Got your back. I know.
Yeah, it's green now. Is it going through? All right, great. Well, thank you all. I'm really glad that you were able to make it and you braved the elements. I'm really thankful that you're all here. We're going to start with welcoming you, obviously, to the University Church panel discussion. This is to celebrate and empower these women who have gladly given their time and for the rest of us to listen, myself included. And again, thank you for being here. All right. And now we're going to introduce the panelists. First we have Ms. Cecelia M. Adams. Cecelia, would you tell us a little bit about yourself, please?
Sure. I'll start off by saying Dr. Cecelia M. Adams.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Thank you for that.
I told him. He practiced and he's just nervous.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
That's
Dr.
okay.
Adams.
That's okay. That's all right. Because he calls me that all the time, and all the emails were Dr. Adams, so I was surprised. But nonetheless, it's a pleasure to be here, and I want to thank you so much for the invitation. We're supposed to state our name, which has already been done. And also, I am from Toledo. I'm a native Toledoan. I was born and raised here. I've lived here all my life. I'm an educator by profession. Started off as a science teacher, and then a building administrator, a curriculum specialist, a school improvement leader for the Start High School area. And then I was part of the superintendent's cabinet, and I retired as an assistant superintendent. And so that to me is really the crux of my life. It's been my life. Education has been such a big part of what I've done. In terms of hobbies, reading and going to the movies. I love going to the theater, and I see people bobbing their heads up and down. There are people who are here that also enjoy that as well. My favorite Toledo feature is the Toledo Museum of Art. I was raised 3 blocks away from the museum. And my mother let me walk those 3 blocks to take art classes, and I thought that was the biggest deal in the world. And so I would go and take my art class. I'd come up, and they used to have a little stand where you could buy candy. I'd buy 2 York peppermint patties, go see the mummy, and then I'd skip home eating my peppermint patties. But to me, since that is one of the top 10 art museums in the world, and Have been to the Louvre in France, it's bigger, but I don't think it's that much better. It just has a lot more masterpieces than we do, but we have some tremendous masterpieces here at the Toledo Museum of Art. And the reason why I said yes to this event was because of 3 reasons. One, when I was on the school board as president of the Toledo Board of Education, we were trying to have some retreats out in the community. And one of the places we had a retreat was right here in this auditorium. And it was a welcoming space. Everyone was so gracious and friendly, and so I remember that. And then my niece and Kimdy is friends with Bradly, and he and her husband, they've played baseball together and that kind of thing, and so I kind of wanted to do it for her as well. And also, I think that this is, I love to be in a place where the Spirit of the Lord is lifted up. And so I'm always eager and willing to participate in something that's happening at a church. I chose to live in Toledo because I haven't really wanted to live anyplace else. It's been my home. I don't really want to live anywhere else. I've passed up opportunities to do so, and I've been glad that I've done that, because now, as a Toledo City Councilwoman, I'm able to help make a difference. And in this renaissance that we're going through, this transition period, I can see it from when I was a little girl to the little slump that we went into, and now it's coming right back up into, I think, what will be a really 21st century city. So, yes. So that's, I think that covers the introduction for me.
It does. Thank you, Dr. Adams. Okay, next up is Charlene D. Gilbert. Charlene, Ms. Gilbert, would you please tell us a little bit about yourself?
Or Dean Gilbert, yeah.
Dean Gilbert, I stand corrected again. Thank you for that.
That's okay, that's fine. Good evening. My name is Charlene Gilbert. I'm really pleased to be here with you this this evening. Looking forward to a conversation with all of you. I am the Dean of the College of Arts and Letters at the University of Toledo. I recently assumed that post. I've been in it now 6 months, so last July. Before that, I was a dean at Ohio State University for the past 3 years, and before that, I was actually at the University of Toledo. So this has been sort of like a coming home to be back, and it's been really good to be back at the university. There are lots of really great things going on there, and it's a pleasure to lead one of the newest colleges. So the College of Arts and Letters is the college has 14 different departments. It's all the arts, all the humanities, and all the social sciences at the university. Just over 1,700 students, 150 faculty, wonderful programs, wonderful students, and so I consider it a pleasure to have the opportunity to help lead this college into the future. I came to Toledo 10 years ago now, 2000, maybe 11 years, and I have now lived in Toledo longer than any other place in my entire life. I was a military brat as a kid, so I moved around every 3 years. So, and I thought everybody did until I got to college and said, oh, you didn't move every 3 years? And I wanted to give my children the gift of that kind of stability, and so that is what when I came here, I said this is where I was going to raise my kids, and it's been really good for all of us. I also have, I'm a documentary filmmaker by training, and but the last 10 years I've been in higher education administration, and I can tell you that that this is sort of, everyone has if you're fortunate, I think, in your life, as Dr. Adams has been, you find your calling, and I feel like for me, my calling is doing this work of opening the doors of higher education. I believe that education is one of the pillars of a democratic society, like a free press, and so I feel honored that I get to be part of that, building that piece of civil society, and opening those doors and making sure that people have access to high quality undergraduate education that they can afford, and then it opens opportunities. I think, as many of you know, there's a great deal of social inequity in our society right now, and one of the few means of addressing that inequity is education. It's one of the few ways in which you can change the trajectory of your family. So whenever I get an email or a letter from a student who tells me that because they had the opportunity to go to a program that I might be responsible for, that now they're a nurse, or they're on their way to law school, they're on their way to medical school, they're the first in their family to go to college, I know that we've helped change the life not just of that one student, but of their entire family and maybe generations. And we have all this data on the kind of impacts we see that correlate with education, so longer lifespans, healthier lives, less likely to be in debt, less likely to be unemployed, less likely to be able to, more likely to be able to withstand kind of the turmoil of an economic society that goes up and down. So all of that, I believe, so I really believe deeply in higher education. I consider it an honor and privilege to be part of the University of Toledo leading this college. So that's just a little bit about me, 2 beautiful kids, tired mom, but glad to be here. I emailed a friend, I said, I'm counting this as my church for the day since I didn't go earlier, so we're good.
And you're preaching, so
Yeah.
There you go. Thank you, Dean Gilbert. Go ahead and say something, Sheena.
Hello? Okay.
All right, next up we have Ms. Sheena M. Barnes. Sheena, would you please tell us a little bit about
You got
yourself?
a good picture of me. Good.
Yeah, Diana picked that one. She was like, Sheena looks great in this.
Yeah, I like that. She got good taste. I was scared for a second.
No, we got you.
Hi, I'm Sheena Barnes. I am a community activist. I've been here roughly 9 years. I am from Flint, Michigan, born and raised, Flintstone. I have 3 wonderful, different type of children. That keeps me busy. I enjoy actually just being here and using my voice for any injustices. I stand in the gateway, I guess, of equality and unity, and I just want to make sure that everybody's heard. That's just me in a nutshell. Oh. Yeah, I was quick.
Great. Thank you, Ms. Barnes. Unfortunately, Tenasio was not able to make it.
Yeah.
No.
I shaved. It was a special occasion.
So Tenasio messaged me last night. He's got a family emergency. So if we could all please think of him and his family and just kind of set, some warm embrace towards them right now. They're in a very trying time, and they need some time. So We do, however, have Ms. Ruth Leonard. And Ruth, would you please tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yes, so my name is Ruth Leonard. I have been in Toledo this is my 5th year being here. I ran for school board this past election cycle. I learned a lot in that campaign. Unfortunately, I did not win, but I'm going to give it another shot.
All right.
I have been an educator since graduating from Bowie State University in Maryland. I majored in child behavioral psychology, and so a lot of my success as an educator has come from learning about children as people as opposed to children as students. And so I've taken a lot of the lessons that I've learned as an educator and kind of applied them to my everyday life, especially in my activism. I am one of the current members of Toledo's branch of the Black Lives Matter program, and I consider myself to be a change agent for social justice, whether it's going to Black Lives Matter events or hosting scholarships and fundraisers for children all around the city. But mainly I am glad to be here tonight to make sure that we celebrate not only the success that we've already had, but making sure that we acknowledge the progress that we are making day by day.
Absolutely, that's great. Great, thank you. Dr. Adams already touched on one of the questions that I had. She said Toledo Museum of Art was her favorite Toledo feature, and I can't agree more. So if you don't mind, I'd like to go down the line further and ask Dean Gilbert, what's your favorite Toledo feature?
What's my favorite Toledo feature? I have so many, just one is hard.
It's very hard.
I like the Toledo Zoo is one of my favorite places to go, take my kids. I like that it's free on Mondays, I think, and it's I think of I treat the zoo the same way I treat the art museum. If I had the luxury, I would I would spend an entire day there, and I would just look at the animal, and like I look at a piece of art, and then I'd go read the little card about them, and then I'd go back and look at them again. And so it would take me a long, when you travel with children through a museum or a zoo, it goes much quicker. But I always imagine one day I'm going to have the luxury of just spending the whole day at the zoo and learning about each animal and their habitat and their pets. So I like the zoo, and I'm also going to cheat and say I also like the metro parks. So those are two of my favorites.
Those are two very good picks. Thank you. Right, Sheena?
Well, for that question, for me, it's kind of hard because there's a lot of different things that I enjoy here in Toledo that we don't have in where I'm from. But I would say also the community. They embrace you. I have so many now family that I call family that actually supports and encourage you for change and for your better. So I would say actually the community here in Lucas County, Toledo, that I love a lot. So it keeps me here.
So I like to consider myself to be a dork. And so, in keeping in line with that, my favorite place in Toledo is actually my classroom, because every day is a new adventure. I never know what's going to happen when those 75 kids make their way in and out of my room, and it's just my favorite place because we can exchange ideas and we can learn from each other, and it's always a powerful moment walking into that classroom, and I know that it's almost time to go home as soon as I get there. So it's always just exciting. Yes, I'm an educator, so it's a lot, but it's a lot of fun as well. So.
All right.
Where do you teach? Oh, Riverside Elementary. Yes.
Great. Thanks for that question, Kel. All right. We have a couple more questions to get through just to introduce the panelists. Ruth, why did you say yes to this event?
Because you asked me.
I'm very gracious that you said yes.
No, so when you first brought it up to me, you said that it was a chance to have a conversation about Black History Month and the Black Lives Matter movement, and I feel like the two are intertwined, and they are inseparable to a certain extent because of the impact that African Americans have had on America as a whole, not only during the month of February, but the other 11 months as well. And the Black Lives Matter movement is a direct reflection of that continued progress. And so I wanted to make sure that I came out to represent not only the movement, but the progress that's happening on a daily basis in Toledo, in Ohio, and in the country. So.
Okay, thank you. All right, Sheena, why did you say yes to this event?
I said yes because I like to talk, first of all. But I like to talk about history and how it made us, and I'm proud of our history. I'm proud of having family members that made history, but I'm also proud of being who I am, making history, and being alongside of people that I'm sitting with right now, just to make sure that we are not forgotten and that we have those dialogues that are uncomfortable in some places. So.
Well, you're not forgotten. You're safe in your love.
I know. See, that's why I said yes, me too.
All right, Dean Gilbert, same question. Why did you say yes to this event?
I said yes because Diana Davis. Is that Diana's last name still, though? No, sorry. Okay, well, the Diana, who I've known for many, many years, asked me, and I have a tremendous amount of respect and love for Diana. So, I would probably show up anywhere she asked me to show up if I could. And on top of that, I think about. The other piece of that is just thinking about that expression, too much is given, much is asked. And so, I think being part of any effort to build conversations and dialogues to help move us forward is important. And so I thought it sounded like, I've heard a lot about this church over the years, and to me it sounds like you all are doing really good work here, and I wanted to be part of that.
And you as well. Okay. And let's go with the other question that, well, actually, I don't think, Dr. Adams, you answered this one, but I might have added this late, so it's nothing crazy. Why do you choose to live in Toledo?
Well, Toledo to me is probably one of the biggest small towns you'll ever live in. And it's a family-oriented city. And as important as my family is to me, I think that you need to be in a place where it actually embraces what families should be doing together. And so I've chosen to stay in Toledo because I think that it's a great family town. The zoo, the mud hens, the parks. We have 125 parks, neighborhood parks. All of them, most of them need some help, and I'm working on that.
Okay.
But at the same time, I have very fond memories of my childhood coming up, and I think that if you want to have something for families or a place where families can enjoy, we have tons of restaurants. We probably have more restaurants than almost any city that I know of, even more populous than ours. But we like to eat out together, we like to eat in together, we like to do things together, and if you have a family, I think Toledo is the place to be.
Very good, thank you. All right, Dean Gilbert, why do you choose to live in Toledo?
For almost everything, I feel like I could just say ditto after Dr. Adams. So and we'll keep the panel moving.
She covered all the bases.
So, I moved here. It's very strong family community, very family kind of centered, lots of family activities and opportunities. Also, though, because it's diverse, it has that big town, city, somewhere in between there. Mm-hmm. So it's a very diverse community, and you have the opportunity to, to engage lots of different kinds of people, and that's one of the things I find really beautiful about the city.
Okay. Thank you. Sheena?
I would say I stay in Toledo because it's very progressive, more so than any larger city that I've been into. And the fact that, like I said, the community, the self, is just why I stay. Like, I know I have support. I know my children have support. I know my children are safe. And that the love that Toledo actually is, statement is, Toledo is love, excuse me. And they actually mean it, and I've seen it, and it just keeps me here.
Okay, thank you. Ruth, why do you choose to stay in Toledo?
I'm going to be completely honest. I moved to Toledo 5 years ago with the plan of going to grad school and moving back home. So I had a strong 2-year maximum for Toledo. But because I used to come here as a child, and the only thing I remember doing was going to church and going to my grandmother's backyard. And that was when I was younger. And then once I moved here, I realized that there was so much more that Toledo had to offer. And Toledo is small enough that you can make a really big impact, just you as an individual, by building those connections in a way that you can't do in much larger cities. And it's what gave me the the courage to decide to run for office after being here for only a few years. It was just the potential that Toledo has as a city, which I really felt excited about, because it feels like, even though Toledo's been around for generations and generations, it feels like we're on the cusp of that progressive movement where you're getting in on the ground floor if you know how to be on the right side of history. And so I wanted to stay and be a part of that change.
Thank you. Okay. The next question for all of the panelists, and I can repeat it definitely if you need me to, is who are some of your most influential Americans who are black, and why? And Dr. Adams, could we please start with you? Sure. We even have a slide dedicated for you.
That picture is of my mother, Dr. Samantha P. Adams. She was absolutely a brilliant woman, and I don't say that just because she was my mother, but it's the truth. She was born in Humboldt, Tennessee, and when my grandfather came up here to look for work, he found work in the lime plant in Woodville, Ohio. He brought his family up here when she was 9 months old. And then they stayed in Woodville until she was 9 years old and settled in the city of Toledo. And then she met my father, who lived down the street and wouldn't let her get away from him. And so they married and had all 6 of us. But what Mother did that was so unique with her intelligence is that she was not only a mother and a wife and a wonderful daughter, but she went to school. And she graduated from South High School. She went to the city of Toledo University, it was called then at that time. And then she went to City College of New York. And then she graduated from the Chiropractic Institute of New York. She decided to be a chiropractor because her sister had problems that the chiropractor in Woodville was the only person could fix. And so she said, I'm going to be a chiropractor. And that's what she did. And she came back to Toledo to practice, which made her the first black woman doctor in the city of Toledo. And she was the first woman of color to pass the Ohio State Medical Board in her field. And then she was very active in the NAACP here. She was president of the local branch, and then she was asked to run for the school board. She was the first black woman elected in Lucas County. She was the first black woman president of the Toledo Board of Education, and then she decided that she was going to take care of her parents when she finished that time, and I had the joy of helping to take care of her with my sisters and my brother until she passed away in 2012. But Mother was absolutely an exceptional woman, and so when I think of having the ability to live in a home where you have someone that was so exceptional, I first think of Mother.
She's great. Thank you. Okay. Yes.
Oh, it's me? Is me next? Oh, okay. Okay. Is it me next? Okay.
Actually,
This one?
well,
Have to go in order?
Yeah.
we can go in order.
Sorry. All right.
I'm trying to remember where I am on the PowerPoint and everything.
Okay, I got you. Just do it.
Okay. Yes. Dean Adams. Who are some of your most influential men? Dean. I'm sorry. I'm so nervous.
Ditto.
Dean. I'm sorry about that. Dean Gilbert. Who are some of your most influential Americans who are black, and why?
So, maybe it's the professor in me, but I feel like I like to try to, maybe we can interrogate that question a little bit before I answer it. So, I do think, right, we're in the 21st century, and I'm going to talk about the people who are influential on me, but I do think it's worth interrogating the term black and really thinking about, what that means, and remembering that this whole idea of race in America there are 2 things. I say this to my students all the time. Race is a social construction, means that powerful, rich people a long time ago, colonizers, made it up, and race is also very, very real. My brother is 6'4", dark-skinned African-American man who gets stopped by the police regularly. And I joke with him all the time. We joke about race being a social construction. I said, but Chuck, when the police stop you, I don't suggest you start there. You know? Like I think we need to remember. So it is both real, and so there are a range of Americans who have inspired me. And I think I sent you a long list, and you're like, please choose one. And it's hard, but on the eve of in the context of this month, I do think about all of the. I actually bought my kids a deck of cards, and I told them I was going to bring it with me here. I probably might have in my backpack of all famous African Americans. I told them I'm going to be sponsoring my own Get Woke school on Saturday, and they're like, because I felt like I was holding up these flashcards and they didn't know any of these people. I said, well, I don't know what's going on in your school, because it sounds like, so we're going to learn 3 a day. And so we've been doing that, and so I encourage everyone to do that. Amazon, there's like $8.99, there's $6.99 decks of cards, famous African Americans, bios in the back. Just buy the deck of cards. Teach yourself and teach your kids and teach your grandchildren, because that's like ongoing real work. And then we all need to be asking ourselves, like, why is it that our kids are still, in the 21st century, going to schools where we are not learning the history of all Americans? We're learning the history of we're learning the history of some Americans.
Right.
So we need to learn the history of all Americans. So for me, I would hope that everybody knows who Toni Morrison is, a brilliant author. One of my favorite books is a book called Song of Solomon that she wrote, and just brilliant literature. I have deep respect for the work of Martin Luther King and Malcolm X. I feel like I inherited their legacy of opening doors that made it possible for me to be sitting here and to be the dean of a college at the university. I understand that was the work of people who are activists in the street. Much love and respect to those of you who engaged in the Black Lives Movement, because they are doing that work. That is the direct line of what Martin and Malcolm were doing that led us to where we are now, and that we have to keep doing this work until we get to point where we all feel safe, right? And we all can live beautiful, just lives and not have to worry that any of that's limited by the color of our skin. Fannie Lou Hamer is another one. She was an activist and in the South, and was active in the movement around black farmers and land. And I think, I guess on the personal front, I'm most inspired and impacted by my own grandfather, Fred H. Mathis, who was a farmer, who, like many farmers in the South, had maybe a couple hundred acres of land, 18 kids, and gave every one of them the opportunity to go to college. And by leveraging, and this is, you have to imagine in the middle of the 20th century, under the apartheid in the American South, my grandfather had land and was willing to give it all up so that his children could go to college. So he gave every one of his children the opportunity to go to college, and he would go to downtown to the banks and put up his land as collateral to be able to get the money to send them to college. That's how important it was. He didn't know what was going to happen in college. He just knew that the next level in terms of freedom and opportunities for his kids meant that they needed an education, and he was willing to risk everything he had for that. And that was a bet that paid off. My mom went to Tuskegee University. She became a dietitian. Within the course of 10 years, my mom went from living in poverty in a very small rural town to being a dietitian, a lieutenant in the Air Force. She's now seeing all her kids go to college. She's going to live to see all her grandkids go to college. Her entire life changed because she had the opportunity to go to college, and all of that was a gift my grandfather gave to his family, and he had a third-grade education. So anytime I have the opportunity to call his name and honor his memory is a gift to me.
Absolutely. It's important that we say those names. Absolutely. Okay, Sheena, you're up. Who are some of your most influential Americans who are black, and why?
And for people who are on my Facebook, sorry, I already shared this today because I just love. It's supposed to be the other one. You want to do him too? Okay, we can do him first.
We can do M.
Yeah. Yeah, okay, this one, okay. I'm like, wait, that's another one, okay. This is Edmund Edmund Weisinger. This is my great-great-great-grandfather. Edmund was born Edmund Bush, born in South Carolina. He was first of the many migrant workers to come to California from the South for the gold rush. After a year working under his slave owner, master, however you want to put it, he bought his freedom for $1,000. He settled in, I'm going to say this wrong, so family forgive me, Vilcea, California, with his family. And when he went to enroll his son, he was denied based on his race and ethnic makeup, because our family is also Cherokee. So they denied him based on being African American descent and Native descent. So my great-great-great-grandfather went to court. Of course, his appeal at first was denied. But on January 29th in 1890, the Supreme Court ruled an early decision based on local courts that it was injustice and favored with Edmund. This win was now named Weisinger Law, which you can look it up. This stated that public schools in California may not establish separate schools for children of African or Native descent. The best part, I mean, that's all great, but this is so just like to talk about him and what he stood for and what he did. It was amazing. The Weisinger Law, or in the law books, the Weisinger versus Cruikshank, became the foundation which Thurgood Marshall used in his legal case for Brown and Board versus Education, excuse me. So he made a platform out of just giving himself and his son equal opportunity for all of us to actually go to school. And so when I talk about him, I'm actually shaking because it's just amazing how a man who was a slave brought his freedom and changed my life, my children's life, and all because he wanted something for his son that was denied. So this is my great-great-great-grandfather, Edmund.
Ruth, hold on just one second. Okay. We do have another one for Sheena, actually.
Oh, okay. I thought it was a comedian one.
And I'm noticing the building blocks that these Americans have led to other Americans doing great things.
Yes.
And thank you so much, ladies, for pointing that out so far. It's fascinating and really rich and amazing. Okay, whenever you're ready.
Oh. So now,
Stop clicking it.
Stop clicking. So now we're going to talk about my cousin. When I say I got loyalty and royalty in my DNA, my family is amazing pioneers for just justice and equality that I just get excited that I know I'm a part of it, and they're with me in spirit. So this is Eddie Rochester Anderson. Some may know, some may not know, depending on how old you are. He was born in September 18th, 1905. He was a comedian and actor. He was best known for his role as Rochester Van Jones on the Jack Benny Show. He lost his voice selling newspapers, so that was how he got his scratchy voice. But he became the first black performer to be on a regular radio production nationwide. In 1942, he was the highest paid black actor in Hollywood. He was inducted in the Radio Hall of Fame in 2001. He's also an activist. That's what I loved about him, how he inspired me. Like, he would make a joke about racism and people would laugh and don't understand that he was talking the truth. So a lot of his skits kind of played off the stereotype of him being actually the, I won't say manhand, but he was a driver for Jack. And so he would do commentary that was like, okay, I'm not doing this, and people would laugh, but he's really defying stereotypes. He had to go through oppression. At that time when he was acting, blackface was still being done. So people would actually think that he was a white actor and ask him to take his makeup off. And so he had to fight against that stigma. Also, when they traveled nationwide, he was not allowed majority of the time to sleep or stay with the other actors, to where Jack himself started to protest that and defy that racism faced on, let's see. And so what I love about him, once again, he had a passion for laughter, but yet he still was an activist. And I think sometimes when you're so serious about activism, you lose your laughter. And he kept that until he passed away. He kept that laughter, but he kept that activism strong in defying racism. So that's my cousin.
And thank you, Sheena. Actually, I'm ready for a little bit of laugh. As soon as Sheena mentioned this, it's not working. Okay. I will recommend if you definitely search for Eddie Rochester Anderson, check the skit Side by Side. It's absolutely hilarious, and his acting is impeccable. He's just a hilarious, great actor.
So, first things first, you can send your children to my classroom anytime. Yeah, I have a very heavy curriculum based on Black history. So when I first decided to run and I was giving a speech somewhere, my mother was in town, and she told me before I went to give my speech to realize that whenever I go and speak that I am representing all of my ancestors every time I go out there. So I can't really narrow it down in regards to my direct ancestors, because I feel like I carry a little bit of all of them with me, and they all push me forward and whisper, keep going, keep going, keep going every so often. But in regards to, I want to say pop culture, my two biggest icons that I think I try to emulate as much as possible are Zora Neale Hurston and Nina Simone. And the reasons why is because Zora Neale Hurston flipped every stereotype on its back when she wrote Their Eyes Were Watching God, in addition to many other novels. But when I read Their Eyes Were Watching God in 11th grade, I recognized the power that Black people have to code switch, to be able to speak one way when we are around our friends and another way when we are in public or in business settings. And she did that throughout the novel. And so first recognizing it in a novel was amazing for 16-year-old me, and then realizing that I do it already and the power that I have to be able to do that, I think is something that allows me to connect a lot of times with my students, because I can talk to them as Miss Leonard, or I can talk to them as just another person that they would see out in their neighborhoods. And I think a lot of times they don't have that, and they only see their educators as just an educator and not as a person outside of the community or outside of the classroom. And for Nina Simone, she was unapologetic 100% throughout her entire life, and it cost her dearly. But I think that I have learned from her tale or her story of being unapologetic in my Blackness, and being unapologetic and telling people to their faces what is right and what is wrong, why it is right, why it is wrong, and dealing with the brunt that comes back from that, but knowing that at the end of the day, I stood up for what I believed in. So when it's time for me to lay it all down on the line, I can say I did my very best and I put my best foot forward. And so that's what I like to emulate in my ancestors and in my daily life.
Thank you very much. Okay, the next question. Do you feel that you have support and connection with African Americans in the Toledo community, and what do you do to give them support?
Well, I would say yes. And I can look to the results from the election. Each time that I've run, I've gotten well over 90% of the African American vote. And I'm very proud of that, because those are my people. And to have their support means the world to me. I have been able to do some things to help them. I think that was the question. Mm-hmm. What have I been able to do to help them? Since being on City Council, I have been able to pass legislation on payday lending. There are about 44 different payday lenders all through the whole city of Toledo. And they disproportionately impact African Americans and African American women in particular. And what happens is that they give very short periods of time to pay back a loan, and then when they can't pay that loan back, then they take out another one and another one. So there's this downward spiral of debt, and people are drowning in it. And then, of course, they have no problem with reporting it to credit agencies that then, that gives them a very bad credit rating. So what this legislation does is the only thing that municipalities can do, and that is to put reasonable restrictions on zoning. So it took some work, but it was able to get legislation that puts reasonable restrictions on payday lenders in the city of Toledo. And so now the law says that there can only be one for every 30,000 residents in the city of Toledo. And so that means there can only be 9. So there are already way too many. So the hope is that some of them will dry up. And it's just too easy. It seems like it's a dream for some people who need some quick money after the other banks are closed or you couldn't get a traditional loan, but then it becomes a nightmare. And so there are what they call financial opportunity centers in the city of Toledo, and also banks and credit unions that are helping individuals who need support when they have financial problems. And so we're trying to direct people to go to those places, and also to get help with managing their money. So that to me was a huge thing. And the state of Ohio, the legislators in Columbus are now working on the business practices. They have the power to help them change the amount of the interest rate and extend the amount of time. So I've been at least to one hearing down there, and people kind of want to stay away from it, but there's a group that is really pushing very hard to make sure that continues, so that those interest rates get lowered and the time gets extended for people who need to have those kinds of loans. Hopefully they'll go to the other options that are available. The other thing was, one of the first conversations that I had, one of the first 2 conversations I had was with the chief of police, Chief Kroll, and the chief of the fire department, Chief Santiago. And both of them in 2 different ways said the same thing. They wanted to get more diversity in their departments. And so Mr. Santiago, Chief Santiago said, I wanted to create an academy. Chief Kroll said, I'd like to have a cohort. So I said, well, I'm an educator. I think I know some people that can help us with that. And so I talked to Dr. Durant, and then I also talked to the people who do the police training out to Owens Community College, and we found out that there is state-adopted curriculum in public safety where you can teach kids in high school to be emergency medical technicians, and they can graduate with that certification, the EMTB, and come out with the ability to do those jobs, and then that makes them even better qualified as potential firemen when they want to apply to the fire class. And of course then they become policemen who have that certification, who if they would want to go to the police class, but they can't go until they're 21. So that, I think, has, in this short time that I've been on council already, have been significant ways in which I've been able to help the African American community, and I do feel that I have the vast majority of their support, and I'm grateful for that.
My position is a little different, obviously. I don't get elected, which I have a lot of respect for having to do that. And I'm also only been in my new position 6 months. So I can talk a little bit about the work I've done interacting with African American communities over the past 3 years. So my previous position as a dean, I was a dean of the Lima campus for Ohio State University in Lima, Ohio, which actually is fairly diverse. And one of the reasons, again, when I took the job, I was excited because I thought, well, this is a fairly diverse town, city, so this should be an interesting position. And then I got to the campus. I remember I addressed the first entering class of about 500 students, and I looked out, and there were barely any African American students in the audience. And I thought, how is this possible? I'm doing this convocation in town, and I look at the census data. There should be at least 30% of the people in the audience should be African American. And so that became one of the projects that I worked on while I was there. I visited churches. I met with the Black Ministerial Alliance. They were very supportive. I went to as many different churches as I could on Sunday, just introduced myself and told them when I encouraged them to send their kids to OSU. I talked, just replace UT with that whenever I say that now. I talked about the power of higher education and really worked closely with community leaders to make sure that the information was getting out and that the resources were being shared and that people knew what kind of resources college campuses actually had to support education. And then when I left, by the time I left, the campus had experienced it was the most diverse the campus has been in. And I remember when they were going back and then we capture these statistics every year, they said, oh, it's the most diverse it's been in 2 years, and 3 years. And then the gentleman who's the director of enrollment kept going back, and he came to me one day and says, Charlene, I've been looking, and as far as I can tell, this is the most diverse the campus has ever been in the history of the campus. And I thought, wow, that's you guys weren't really trying then, because I didn't do that much. And it was also the year that they had the highest ACT scores they had for entering class in like the prior 5 years, and so that work was a result of being able to identify need, work with the African American community locally, and as a result, we were able to make big change, and I was really proud of that, and that's the kind of work I want to continue to do now that I'm here in Toledo.
You broke it. She broke it. Hello? Okay. So my answer may ruffle some feathers, but it's my truth. In my opinion, you asked if I have the support of the African American community. I said yes and no. In my opinion, we are fighting Stockholm Syndrome within our culture, from the system that abuse us mentally, emotionally, physically, and systematically. So when someone is producing change or making something different, we get a lot of pushback from our own community. I'm speaking for myself, no one else. This is what I felt. So when you asked that question, it was kind of uncomfortable. I'm like, well, I don't want to say yes because that makes us look bad as a whole. But in the truth, this is what my truth is. We are trying to figure out who we are within trying to be who we are at the same time. So we have a lot of conflict within ourselves to figure out that. But at the same time, yes, I do have a sense of connection, because I see a lot of our sisters and brothers trying to do something different. They're trying to use their voice in different ways. We have made amazing accomplishments within this year alone to get things voiced and opinion in the forefront. And I feel connected to that. I know that my voice is not alone when I'm looking at someone who looks like me or doesn't look like me. For when you ask how do I support them, I acknowledge their generational trauma. And I support them and love them for who they are and where they are. Everybody is not going to be where I'm at. It's a good thing and a bad thing. And I just hope that I can love them enough and support them enough to where if they want to change, they will change to help move progression along for African Americans. What was the question? I just want to make sure
I can definitely repeat it. No problem. Ruth, do you feel that you have support and connection with African Americans in the Toledo community? Oh. And what do you do to give them support?
Okay. So, all right, we're close. Get it, girl. I do not. The reason why is because there is a very real change that is happening right now that I feel like it's along the same lines of the change that happened, or is the result of the change that happened during the civil rights movement. There was a major shift from how things were happening to what they needed to change in order for us to move forward as a people. And right now, I feel like the older generations are digging their heels in, and they're saying, this has worked for us, and we are going to continue to do things this way because they have worked for us. And my generation is coming in, but we're so raw, and it's all so new to us, and we're all trying to take in decades worth of movements all within a span of a few years. We're trying to push things forward at a much faster rate. And so as a result of that, you have things that get in the way, like egos, which can break a program down almost at its inception. You have things like trying to figure out if you want to be a part of that new movement that kind of follows in the same path as the older generations and moving things along at an incremental rate, or if you want to go in and bust the door down. And I think that right now what's happening is you have those two major forces, whether you're going to be the political strategist who's going to figure out how to pick the lock nicely, or if you're going to be the activist and kick the door down. And right now, that's what my generation is going through, where we are trying to be the activists that kick the door down, and the political strategists are just like, no, that's not what we do. That's no, you can't say that, you can't do that, you can't go here, you can't be with these people. And I think that happened when I ran for office, where there was a very big difference between how the older generation wanted me to approach my campaign and how I wanted to approach it. And as a result, I feel like I was shunned by a lot of black politicians, at least. Not to say you, Dr. Adams, because I don't think I spoke with you directly, but I know that the other black politicians that I did speak with, it was always an arm's length type of interaction, where I remember asking one black politician, can you help me host a fundraiser? And her response was, no, I can't. I can't help you host a fundraiser, because if I help you host a fundraiser, then everyone else is going to ask me to host a fundraiser. When I'm a new candidate, I'm young, I'm green, I don't know exactly how to get in the door with all of these people, and so I'm trying to do it the right way, and you can't get mad at me when I get tired of the status quo. And I feel like for Toledo, a lot of times it's those two things fighting against each other. So you have the the younger generation who has their infighting because they're trying to figure out what's going to work. And the thing that reminds me of is when Martin Luther King went down for the Selma March, and he had to come up against the people in SNCC. And you have that infighting of whether or not you want to do things this way or that way, and who's going to win, and how are you going to make it through this struggle and this fight, and how are you going to keep that infighting out of the public eye? Because now, on top of having that public fighting in your own race, you still got to figure out how to make things look good, because you can't let everybody else know. It's not everybody else's business. So we already know what happens in the house stays in the house, but there also has to be a point when you say, this can't happen in the house anymore. And so right now, personally, I feel like my generation is going through that change of figuring out what is our house going to look like, and whether or not we're going to be able to allow the generation that came before us to be a part of that new structure.
Can I say something?
All right.
Yeah,
totally.
Yeah, I was sitting here and I just think it's worth remembering or thinking about. Whenever I'm asked some of these questions, I imagine like if you slid all of us out, right, and brought in 4 white women, there'd be questions about, do you feel that women support you? And, and then, like you can think about, I'm sure Hillary Clinton, we see that question being asked a lot. And I thought, well, you slid in 4 Latinos, it'd be kind of, but I thought if you slid in 4 white men, would there be a question about, do you feel that white men support you? Like that sounds absurd, doesn't it? That sounds absurd to everybody. So I just think it's worth remembering that we are rich and diverse and dynamic, all of our communities, and so we're not a monolith. Right. Just like, so when we say the word women, that's a really broad category, and I'd just like to say that when we look at electoral politics, black women have been doing a lot of work the last several hundred years. We've been doing our work. So when they say, so if someone were to ask a panel of white women about, did women support you, it'd be a complex answer, right? Because it's not. And so I just think it's always useful. Like if you're trying to test out something amongst yourselves and you're like, should I say that? Just immediately do a little quick test, slip it through your head and say, would I ask a white man that question? And if it sounds weird asking a white man that question, that might be your first cue that maybe I should rethink that. I'm not saying that your question is necessarily bad. I'm just saying that it's just the way I do lots of tests. It's sort of like, test yourself sometimes, and it's a tool that I find useful.
I know you wanted this conversation to be organic, and it's starting to get organic.
It is. Yes, thankfully, yeah. I like it.
My grandmother was a Pentecostal minister and the pastor and founder of our church. And she always said, he calls the young because they're strong. He calls the old because they know the way. There needs to be a combining of the young and the older together to get things done. even in Dr. Martin Luther King's time, they had, you mentioned SNCC, Urban League, and all these other organizations, and NAACP, they seemed to be at cross purposes in some ways, but they were all trying to do the same thing in their own way. And NAACP got things done through legal means, and the Black Panthers got some things done because they raised some sand and did some things that were pretty aggressive. And so all of it working together is really what made it happen. So I don't want you to feel like what you're doing is, or the way you're feeling is something that isn't needed. It is, because it has that little picking at the heartstrings of the community that wakes them up to the kind of dangers we have if we don't do something now. We have to listen to our young people, and they also have to listen to the older people so that they can find out what the way is. You can break the door down, but once you get in there, you got to know what to do once you get in. And so I think that working together, we can figure that all out. Martin Luther King said that there's nothing more dangerous in all the world than ignorance that is well-meaning and conscientious stupidity. And those were his words. And he was actually talking in terms of, he used that in a sermon where he was talking about, Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do, the blindness of the individuals who were crucifying him. We're in church, so we can talk about this. Mm-hmm. And so what he was saying was that they were blind, they couldn't see that this is the Son of God. And look what we're doing to him. And so what he was saying was that was the stupidity. They didn't realize what they were doing. He could have asked God, instead of saying forgive them, he could have said bring down the wrath of all your fury on these individuals, because look what they've done to your son. But what we have to do is we have to realize that there are some growing pains that everybody has to go through. And then when I was younger, I thought I knew everything too. My mother made sure that I knew that wasn't exactly correct. And so you have to listen. And I'm just asking you to be patient, because in time, things will work out just fine, because you're smart and intelligent. I think you got a lot to offer. And so don't be discouraged by anything that anybody might say that seems discouraging. Be encouraged by the fact that you've got this fire in your belly and it can be used, and we need to want to channel it properly and get some things done. We're going to get some things done working together, all ages.
Okay, so my first question is for you, Dean Barnes?
No, Barnes.
No, I'm sorry. I'm sorry, Gaines?
Charlene.
Oh, I'm sorry, Dean Gilbert, I'm sorry. So I think it's worth noting the vast differences between, and I'm sure you already know, between black women and white women, and why the conversation is different between white men and black women. And I think that while it is very important to talk about whether or not you would ask these same questions to a group of white men or a group of Latinx women or any other collection of individuals, I think it's also worth noting the fact that the dynamics of these relationships are different as well, and that throughout history the dynamics have been different. And I think that definitely should not be ignored in the way of keeping the conversation on one level playing field, because the playing field isn't level. I think that there is a very big difference between talking to white men than there is talking to black women. And I think that it's worth noting that yes, black women are showing up in droves for politics on a whether it's in office or showing up for elections. But I think that also there is a very real difference between the structures of white men in politics and white men in conversations about politics as opposed to black women. I feel like we came to the race a lot later than they did, of course, and that bears weight in the conversation. In regards, Dr. Adams, to being patient, I completely understand being patient, but I think that something also must be said when it comes to being shunned because you're young and being pushed away because you're young. And I feel like the fire that's in my belly, I feel like it's always going to be there, especially as an educator, because I need to light that fire in the next generation, so I'm always going to have it. But I think that there is a very real quality to having someone tell me no because of everyone else, or having someone hold me accountable in a way that other counterparts aren't because I'm so much younger, and blaming it on my youth and not on the intelligence that I have, and I think using my youth as an excuse to count me out.
Would you like to reply?
Well, no, I think that's enough. That's enough on that.
Okay. Thank you all for that. That was amazing. That was a really good conversation, and I enjoyed listening to it. Yes, and thank you for critiquing the question. Absolutely.
Critique the question.
She did. I was really stubborn and pushed that question through, so I do appreciate the critique. Thank you very much. Okay. Next question. Let's start with Dr. Adams and move down the table again, if you don't mind, ladies. Have you ever been made to feel un-American?
I've never felt un-American. That's all I know how to be. I'll be honest with you. We learned the Pledge of Allegiance. We are familiar with the Bill of Rights. We've learned the preamble to the Constitution. We have inalienable rights, and among them are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. I've been able to do that, even being an African-American female. Now, when I was in Bowser High School, I actually started off at Scott High School, which was at the time 99.9999999% black. My mother was president of the NAACP. They started open enrollment, and you could send your child to enhance enrollment, to enhance integration. If you were a child that was in trouble and being suspended, and if your attendance was good and your parents could get you there. So mother decided she was going to test that. My sister Denise is here, Mrs. Denise Onya. She and I are born the same year, exactly 11 months apart to the day. So mother sent her two little daughters to Bowser High School, which was at that time 100% white. So we tested the open enrollment. And so I had the experience of being in almost 100% black high school, and then in a 100% black Caucasian high school. We never had a minute of trouble. We were on the principal's list. We were in Rebelese, which was the student-written, student-produced, student-directed program at the end of the year. We were in the Philalethean Society, which was all the River Road girls. You had to be asked to be in there. Now, all we wanted to do was get a good education. And there were some things happening at Scott at that time that later changed and got better. And mother sent us to this school, but most of all, she wanted to test this theory of open enrollment. It worked. We graduated. I was the first black graduate from Bowser High School, and I would have been the first graduate that day, but Mary Beth Abadili's name started with a B instead of AD. And then right after that was Denise, and then Reverend Liggins, who had been the pastor at Warren A.M. Zion at that time, sent his son there. And so we three graduated at the rec center from Bowser High School. So I've been able to test or be a test person for the American dream, that you can go wherever you want to go, eat wherever you want to eat, sleep wherever you want to sleep, live wherever you want to live, get an education wherever you want to get an education. And so I feel like I haven't felt un-American. Now, when we were in advanced placement English class, the question was asked of us, well, if everybody was like you and your sister that's in your race, we wouldn't have any problems. I almost hit the roof, because not everyone in my ethnicity had the opportunities that we had to live the kind of life that we were living, to have the kind of parents and grandparents that we had, and to do the things that we could do. And we weren't out there trying to be the spokespersons for the black community. We were just trying to get a good education in a school that seemed to be doing a better job at that time. And so it brought light on the fact that there were some things that needed to be corrected at Scott, and that helped that school as well. So un-American, never.
Last February, I was a part of a direct action in which we blocked traffic for all of 10 minutes, possibly. As a result of that, when Angela Davis came to the University of Toledo, she shouted out my organization, which was probably the highlight of my career as a political activist. As a result of that direct action, I was called every type of terrorist, and I was threatened with actual physical violence, whether through being shot or just in general death threats. I did not feel like I had the same protection of the Constitution as would a white counterpart. I did not feel as American as I would have otherwise. It was the first time that I had felt directly attacked as a result of my decision to stand up for what I believed in. We were protesting the Muslim ban that had just been brought up, and I was standing in solidarity with Muslim brothers and sisters, and then we were also protesting for Black Lives Matter. And when I tell you, like, there are screenshots that I have of people saying, oh, I'm a part of a terrorist organization, I should be shot. Oh, if I was there, I would have made sure that I had my open carry permit and I would have handled it then. I did not feel protected under the American flag. I did not feel like a proud American who wanted to stand up for the Star-Spangled Banner. I did not feel like I was a part of this great country that was going to keep me protected. I felt like I was a target, and I had a target on my back. And then running for office and everything that went along with that, getting really polite hate mail on American flag postcards with American flag stamps. It made it very clear that there is a line that went down the middle of people who felt like they were American and they represented what America was to them, and then me. And I don't know if it's me giving what other people think power, but it's what you go through whenever you have someone directly attack you, whether it's through thought, word, or deed. You don't feel as protected, you don't feel as safe. And then on top of all of that, all of the shootings that have been happening in the news, and constantly seeing it, and constantly being worried that my, at the time, 5-year-old nephew was going to be targeted because he was out in the park with a toy gun. Like, there are certain protections that I feel like you get being able to identify as an American that, as an African American, I don't feel that. And I don't know if it's gonna take time, or if I need to go on like a pilgrimage to Mecca and go on a Hajj and then come back and have a different approach to how I see other human beings. But I think that last February definitely changed my view on how I view myself as a citizen. I've always identified as African American, mainly because in my mind, when I was conceived, my parents were 2 African Americans. So I was an African American, and I know that there's a lot that you can unpack from that, of whether or not I'm an American first, and then I'm an African American, and then I'm a woman, and there's a lot to unpack from all of that. And I can't get into that conversation because at this point right now, on today at 7 whatever time it is, I identify as an African American, and I feel like that gives me a different level of protection than simply as an American.
You have the little slide thingies?
I do.
Okay.
Could you run Sheena's slides, please?
Okay,
ahead,
so the
Sheena.
question is, do I feel American? Absolutely not, okay? Like I said before, I'm from Flint, Michigan. And I have to, I'm about to get emotional. Ooh, it's angry. Okay. Because I have to go home, watch my family, my mother, my father, my friends, my cousins, deal with this on a daily basis. To see rashes on my father, he can't take a shower there because his immune system is bad. This made one of the New York Times. This is a little boy, he took a shower, and this is the rashes that he had to deal with. I had to witness my cousin's little 6-year-old hair falling out because of the water. I had to see how their lives are daily impacted about going to get water to be able to eat. These are my 3 cousins. They made actually National Geographics before and after their homeschooling. They have to go get water every day, till this day. This has been going on roughly 4 years. And they are estimating that the pipes will not get fixed to 2020. To not only see those things, those images of how they forgot about people they call American, but to turn around and get slapped in the face when they make jokes. And I know you heard jokes like this. It's become now the norm to laugh at Flint in their drinking water. It's become almost numb that people are still and have died in Flint from this. That women have, repo health care has been tainted. They have lost many miscarriages. We don't know the effects that it has on the children. I have 2 nephews that might highly impact their autism because of the lead content in their water. So do I feel American? Do I feel like America cares about me? No. Because the proof is in the pudding. Most cities that go through these kind of epidemics with their water is either working poor or minorities. And it's like we're forgotten. The government is not there anymore. Do not believe what you see on the news. There is no government official passing out water. It is people like me that do water drives, or people or organizations that go in and still do water. We have the money to fix the pipes, but Governor Snyder is in position. He is a murderer. There's nothing about it. And yet, he's still over Michigan. So how can I say I'm proud to be American when I am watching them kill my city daily? To when I have family members who come and are afraid to take baths because they don't know what it might do to their skin. The anger and rage that I get when I talk about it and someone make a joke. To know that people are dying, children are dying, children are impacted, and yet America does nothing. So no, I don't feel American at all.
Yeah, that's another hard question. I think everything that you heard, I feel like this is exactly why the way we experience this country and walk through this world is entirely different, and we haven't even covered the half of it, right? This is just the tip of the iceberg. What I think of immediately is our sisters and brothers who are in prison right now. Every time I hear a story about an African American who is in prison for selling weed or having weed, and they're in prison for 10 or 15 or 20 years or 30 years, I think, clearly the experience of being an American is different for people based on race, because some of us end up in jail for 40 years for really small things, and some of us don't. And you asked about how's that going to change? All that stuff that you were talking about, kicking down those doors, that's how it's going to change. That's how it's going to be different 10 years from now, 20. You are on the front lines doing exactly what you're supposed to do. I was a student activist in college. We fought to end apartheid in South Africa. When I left college, I was a community activist. We were doing anti-eviction work in a community in Boston called Roxbury, Massachusetts. And all of the stuff that you're talking about, sister, like, man, that sounds so familiar. So familiar. Makes me feel old, because I'm like, I think I'm not the young one. Like, I'm listening to her story, I'm thinking, yeah, and I'm like, oh wait, no. I'm the old dude in the story. So yeah, but that is how struggle and change happens. You keep knocking down those doors, you keep pushing and saying we have to think about this differently because we are in a crisis, right? And we are better today than they have been, but we have so much further to go. We got to get our sisters and brothers out of prison, and we need all of your help to do that. We have to address the kind of injustice that allow someone to allow Flint, Michigan to happen, right? And so we have all that work to do, and that is American work. That is the real work of true Americans, fighting injustice and fighting for equality. So in the spirit of like the great fight for justice that is American, then I'm an American. And if American means fighting unjust wars, imprisoning unjustly and unfairly, then yeah, I don't feel very aligned with that vision of America at all. So I feel like my one refrain on this panel, but it's complicated.
Well, the only thing that I would add is that we really do have to remember that in spite of all the good things that have happened and the individuals who have laid the foundation and helped us to make the progress that we've had, it's not a perfect world, and there's a lot of suffering that's still taking place. And a lot of the struggles of the younger people, are similar but different than those of the ones who came up with us when we were younger. And the truth of the matter is that we have to keep our heads up. We have to be as positive as we possibly can, and we have to think through everything that we do. And if we do that, I think our country will be a better place. I think this would also be a good time to remind you that you will do better in Toledo. And the man who's working on the water authority for Toledo and this region is the same man who has been working with the people in Flint and Detroit with their water situation. And I know, as dreadful as that is, it's going to get better. And it's unfortunate that the majority of the people in Flint are African American, so that's why it seems like it was a neglected situation, because of the people who were there were mostly black. And it very well may have been. It can't look any better because it does look bad. But we have to stay as positive as we can and keep working to make things better everywhere. And what we do as an example in Toledo, I think, can be a model for Flint and every place else.
All right. Just wrap it up here. Just have a couple more questions left. What gets you out of bed in the morning, and what keeps you going?
I've got bills. I also have a puppy that I recently got over Christmas. But no, really, what gets me out of bed is the same thing what gets me out of bed is the same thing as my favorite place in Toledo. It's my students. I've been an educator, like I said, since graduating from college, and getting my students to recognize the power of their voices is probably the most exciting part about being an educator. And I think it far exceeds the stress and the pressures of dealing with a teach-the-test type of education system. Knowing that I can have organic conversations with them about what's happening in their daily lives before we get to any sort of ELA content, and then figuring out how to tie what's happening in their lives into that content and making it an organic learning experience so that they can bring their communities into the classroom and they can take that classroom into their communities, and kind of creating that sort of cycle so that I know that if nothing else, the 75 students that I have and that I see on a daily basis, once they leave my classroom, they'll be a little better off than before they got to me. And I think that gives me the hope that the next generation is going to be all right, or at the very least, my 75 kids are going to be all right. So knowing that I am having a direct impact on the next generation is what gets me up out of the bed every day, and it's what keeps me going.
Mine is my children, but also the children of the community. I don't want them to be fighting the same fight that we are now fighting, that our grandparents and our mothers and fathers have fought. I want to end this crap, since we're in church, end the crap that we have to fight. So I will give everything in my last breath to make sure that my children and other youth do not have to sit there and do the same thing that we're doing today.
I've said it before, I just deeply believe in the power of education. What gets me up is knowing that I'm part of an institution, an organization that's creating the kind of pathways so that we can have more amazing teachers like you. So, we're creating pathways so that whether you major in English or history, that maybe you can do a one-year program and then go into the public schools, and hoping that the doors of public schools are going to be open to all that rich talent that we're trying to recruit into the college. I feel like my job as an older person at this point in my life is, someone once told me this when I was sitting where you were 20 years ago, and he worked at a university. He said, my job, Charlene, is to create handles on these institutions, and your job is to grab those handles and shake. So I'm going to keep creating handles, you keep shaking.
All right.
There's an anonymous poet that said, age is a state of mind. If you have left your dreams behind, if you no longer look ahead, if your ambitions' fires are dead, then you are old. But if in life you keep the jest, and if from life you take the best, no matter how the years go by, no matter how the birthdays fly, you are not old. One day you'll be at this end of the panel.
I look forward to it.
And hopefully you'll be able to say that you got some things done, and I believe that you will. And so what gets me up in the morning is knowing that I have another opportunity to get something done. I know that January 8th, that cohort started, and come springtime, we're going to have 18 young people who are going to make a difference, because they'll be able to graduate as EMTB certified young people. That's making a difference and getting something done. I also am happy to know that my living will not be in vain. That gets me up in the morning. And there's a prayer by St. Francis of Assisi that my mother gave me and framed it. And I keep bringing her back, because remember I told you that was the most significant person I could name. I gave you a long list, and you told me to pick one, and I did.
You did.
And so that prayer says, and I won't read it all, but it says, Lord, make me an instrument of your peace. Where there is hatred, let me sow love. Where there is injury, pardon. Where there is doubt, faith. Where there is despair, hope. Where there is darkness, light. Where there is sadness, joy. We can do that by getting things done. And so I'm just hoping that I continue to get up every day and continue to get things done. Thank you so much for this opportunity.
Same here. So we're running low. This is our last question. So I'm going to leave the ball in your court. Is there anything else that you'd like to say? Some last words?
So the Community Solidarity Response Network of Toledo is an amazing organization, and we are actually the creators of a lot of the social change that's happening in Toledo. We have had, in the past year, we have hosted a scholarship where we have granted 3 students, one from UT, one from Bowling Green, and one from Toledo Early College, with $1,000, $750, and a $500 scholarship. We have done different events around the city where we celebrate our children as well as our change agents in our communities. We also have amazing artists and poets such as Jody Summers in the back. And also, thank you to Ms. Gina Fry and Amjad for coming out. We have members from every end of the spectrum that represent the Community Solidarity Response Network of Toledo. And as a result, they represent Black Lives Matter. So the one thing that I want everyone to realize is that, number one, Black Lives Matter is not a terrorist organization. Just want to clear that up. And number two, we have a rich background of people who are all fighting for equality and justice for African Americans in our community. But we also are coming from the aspect of anyone who is disenfranchised. We want to make sure that you have a voice. We want to make sure that you know that there is a community of people out there who want to work with you to fix whatever your problem is. And it's not just for Black people, it's for anyone who is disenfranchised. So anyone who has any sort of system against you, we are here to show your support. But also, Community Solidarity Response Network of Toledo needs donations. So if you would like to support our organization financially, you can either see myself or Jody. He is the one holding up the Black Power fist in the back. And also, if you have any other questions for me as an activist, let me know.
So I forgot to mention that I actually started a Facebook group called Royalty Unite. I was kind of nervous at first. I just skipped all over that part. You can find it on Facebook as Royalty Unite. It's for advocates and activists as well, but we also make sure that we know about events going on just like this. Our next major event will be in April. We're doing a water drive for Flint, Michigan. So please, if you want to donate a jug of water, $1, anything, let me know. You can email me. I have cards on me afterwards. But to know also that the work that is being done is not done in Flint, so don't believe the media. And just remember to challenge what you see in the media about anything.
I just want to thank all of you for being here tonight. Thank the church for hosting this event. Thank you for letting me be on this amazing panel. I have learned so much just from being here tonight, and this is not at all what I was expecting, so thank you. So it's an honor to be sort of up here with all these wonderful women. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Mr. Mathias, for giving us the opportunity to share our viewpoints on these things and for empowering us to share the struggle that we've experienced in our own ways, some more or less in different degrees. But the truth of the matter is that in 1955, I believe it was, Carter G. Woodson started with Black History Week, then it became Black History Month, and now we're talking about it 365 days a year. But this is the month where all of these really important activities take place, and your objective was really phenomenal. And for this to be a church right here on Hill Avenue, trying to get this message out so that Black history is spread in our city, I think is extremely important. When I was on curriculum committees and textbook committees, we were looking to see if there were pictures of people that looked, like our community. You had faces, Black and brown faces in there with the Caucasian faces, because there had been the systematic exclusion of African Americans from history, and their faces were not in books of any particular kind of subject, for the most part. So that started happening. So there's lots of things that every generation is accomplishing, and each generation has to make sure they accomplish what's necessary to be done in their time. So I'm just grateful for this opportunity to have had to speak with this beautiful group of people, have my sister here and be with these beautiful sisters here on the panel, and thank you so much. God bless you all.